The list of fun cars under $40,000 that offer a manual transmission is rather short. You have the Volkswagen GLI, Honda Civic Si, Elantra N, and of course the GR86 and Subaru BRZ. But if you're on a strict budget at around 35 grand and you want all-wheel drive and a manual transmission, everything points to the Subaru WRX. While you can get all-wheel drive with a GR Corolla or Volkswagen Golf R, you're most likely spending over $40,000 to receive those two vehicles. But with the Subaru WRX, it is one of the most affordable options out there. And throughout the last few months, we have checked out these fun cars, but we've kind of glossed over what the WRX is all about at this price point and in base form. And in today's video, we're going to check out what this car is all about. We're going to check out the exterior, the interior, take it out for a quick test drive, and see why the Subaru WRX might be all you really need in life heading into 2025. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Subaru of Wakefield in Wakefield, Massachusetts for letting me come down here to check out the Subaru WRX. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Subaru inventory. So as always, let's begin with pricing. For 2024 and the base trim, you're looking at a starting cost of just under $33,000, which is a slight increase over the outgoing model year and the 22 model year for this exact trim, mostly because Subaru did throw in some new features for the interior, which we'll go over later on in this video. When you're comparing the WRX to its closest rivals, it does go head-to-head with the Honda Civic Si, Volkswagen GLI, and Elantra N. If you are looking at a two-door, you could throw in the GR86. I think the Mazda Miata is a bit of a stretch, and for a completely different type of buyer at around $30,000. But more importantly is that I have been receiving a lot of DMs lately from followers saying that Honda dealers are putting a markup on the 25 Si, and I'm not too surprised by that because last year at this time, I was looking at buying a Civic Si, and at $35,000 for 200 horsepower just made absolutely no sense. Whereas Subaru dealers sell their WRXs at MSRP, which is why they're so compelling. On top of that, you get all-wheel drive. So a lot of sedans in this market are front-wheel drive only, and if you do live in colder regions of the US like I do up here in New England, you want to have that year-round capability, and that's why the WRX, in my mind, is the go-to in this segment. Now, what makes the WRX interesting, but also maybe somewhat controversial, is the design, because for 2024, nothing has changed here. I personally think the premium is the better way to go under $40,000 because aesthetically, you get a bit more than what we have here with this base. So up front, you are going to receive LED headlights. They're not steering responsive. To receive those, you will have to go with the limited trim. Now, sadly, with the base, you do not receive LED fog lights, and that's one of the reasons why I personally went with the premium, because I wanted to have that aesthetic. I also wanted to have that rally look to my WRX. Now, also another thing too, you're going to have the iconic hood scoop, which goes very well with the design of this car. And I know a lot of you are going to say, but all of these things do look great, but the cladding is just a bit too much for me. I actually like it. I think the cladding makes this car look aggressive and off-road worthy, so I'm not going to complain about that at all. Another thing I do like too about the WRX for the VB generation is the gloss gray grille. I think it contrasts very well with the solar orange paint color that we have here today on our model. Then as you make your way over the side profile, you are going to receive 17-inch alloy wheels, whereas the premium trim and above will come equipped with 18s. Now, if you are somebody who wants the optimal amount of on-road comfort and also a minimal amount of road noise, the 17s will be the way to go, although the WRX's sound deadening isn't the best in this market, so you're going to be experiencing that road noise regardless. Also, of course, with the sports tune suspension, the ride is going to be very stiff and a bit rough. You're also going to find color-matched side mirror caps. I love that on the base trim. Some manufacturers give you more of this matte gray or matte black look, and it does look rather cheap, but the color-matched side mirrors does add a nice presence to this car. Now, with the base trim, you are not going to receive blind spot detection or rear cross traffic alert, and more specifically within the WRX lineup, you're not going to have heated side mirrors either. So I do think that this car in base form is better suited for people who live in warmer climates, whereas the premium would be the way to go if you do live in a colder region of the US. And as you make your way around to the back, again, you are going to have that aggressive cladding, but what makes up for it is the quad exhaust tips, which just gives this car such an aggressive road presence on the roadways. Now, with the base trim, you're not going to find the subtle deck lid spoiler. and that does take away from the body lines a bit. It doesn't look as aggressive. And even though that subtle decklet spoiler isn't going to make a huge difference because you can go aftermarket with a duckbill spoiler or maybe an STI spoiler, I just like having that for the trunk. It just adds a bit more to the design of this car. Now, you're not going to have LED taillights, but I do like the shape of them. They look very aggressive. Kind of reminds me of what you have with the GR86. And of course, with the turn signals, they are incandescent as well. So no changes here for 2024, but I personally like the design of this car. It has most certainly grown on me over the last year or so. Before hopping inside, for 2024 and the base, you are not going to receive keyless entry or a push button start. So you will have the physical key right here, but you can still lock and unlock with this key fob. Hopping inside the Subaru WRX Base for 2024, if you are somebody, maybe you're looking at a slightly used 23, there are a few differences here. Subaru did make some changes. 2 of them you're going to notice immediately, and 1 not so much. So let's first start off with your head unit. You are going to have an 11.6-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility. This replaces the dual touchscreen setup that we saw last year, and we do see in other base trims across the Subaru lineup. I personally don't like those dual screens at all. They don't look that great, and it looks very archaic for a vehicle in this market. Now, I know some of you are going to complain, oh, there's not as many physical buttons. You will get used to it. I can promise you that after a few days, you are going to be very acclimated with this system. So on both sides of the screen, you will find a volume and tuning knob, physical buttons for your front and rear defrosters, and then of course, dual zone climate control. With the base, you are not going to have heated front seats. So if you do want that, maybe you live in a colder region of the US, go with the premium. The bottom of the screen will be home to your fan speed, fan direction. Then of course you can turn on or off the dual zone climate control from there. For the screen itself, you'll have all the widgets placed right in front of you. So that way, if you want to access your vehicle settings or maybe even your valet mode, anything that is really important to you is all going to be placed right here on the screen. As with all Subaru products, you are going to have a vehicle control tab so you can adjust the cruise control acceleration speed, your driving assistance features. So from here, you can turn on or off pre-collision braking, forward collision warning, and then of course the lane departure warning. You can adjust that to your liking as well. You can turn that off, which actually I would do. I would turn off a lot of the safety systems in the WRX because I'm used to that in my 23. Also, of course, you can adjust your warning volume levels and, of course, the units of measurement. As with all Subaru WRXs, you will receive a rear backup camera with trajectory, but no reverse automatic braking. You're also not going to receive any other camera angles, and I wouldn't expect that for a car at just over $30,000. The next change here, and I've kind of already gone over this very subtly, is the fact you do get the EyeSight driver assist technologies. And that to me is probably more controversial than the 11.6-inch touchscreen. Because when you take a look at the Subaru WRX and what it's been all about over the last few generations, but also even the first 2 model years for the VB, it is more of a raw experience. It's an old school experience because with the base, you do not get blind spot detection. So this is more of an old school car that you don't really see anymore in this segment. A lot of vehicles have the safety systems, have the safety equipment, but the Subaru WRX was always that analog and tactile car that a lot of purists could hop into and really enjoy because you do not get auto rev matching. So there's a lot of things here that you don't receive in the WRX that I know a lot of you are going to appreciate and love. But the EyeSight driver assist technology does kind of get in the way because you have lane centering, you also have lane departure warning. Now you can turn off some of these features, but I think a lot of you don't want to have any of that in your car, and I fully understand that, but that has been implemented into the 2024 model year across all trims for this Subaru WRX. In front of you will be the analog gauges with a small information display in the center. We've gone over this numerous times in other Subaru products, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But by using the buttons on the left side of the steering wheel, you can scroll through a variety of information. Most importantly, your boost gauge, which that's usually what I look at all the time when I'm behind the wheel of my WRX. You have a digital speedometer. Then, of course, you can check out your tire pressure monitoring system, remaining fuel range. And this is actually more of a trimmed down experience than what you're going to find in other cars, but I actually like that. I don't want to have a lot of technology with a car like this. And the last change is your turn signal stock, which does lock into place when you're using your left or right turn signal. I love that. My 23 doesn't have that, so I think if you are looking at buying a VB generation WRX, that is one minor feature that you might not appreciate, but I know a lot of us who own 22s and 23s wish we had in our cars. Then as you make your way towards the center console, you will find a USB-A and USB-C input to go along with a 12-volt outlet. You have a nice storage compartment for some smaller items, maybe a wallet or two or a smartphone. Then, of course, you have your gear shifter. Now, here at Subaru of Wakefield, they do equip all their WRXs with the STI short throw shifter. Makes it far more pleasant when you are upshifting and downshifting when you are on some winding back roads, just having a lot of fun on your weekday commutes. Then you're going to find your manual parking brake, which is so rare to see now because a lot of manufacturers are using electronic parking brakes. And this to me just kind of goes a long way and kind of doubles down on what I've been talking about here, where Subaru is giving you an old school experience, and that is one minor touch I do like. Now you will have two cup holders, but I will say they are oddly styled, so I don't know what you're going to be fitting in here because they might spill on your cloth seats. And then for the center storage compartment, you will find enough room for some smaller items. And speaking of the seats, you are going to receive manually adjustable cloth seats for both the driver and passenger. As I've already talked about, if you want to get heated front seats, you'll have to go with the premium trim and above. Now, I know some of you might want to have the power adjustability, but I think it'll be very easy to find your ideal seating position sitting in this car. I personally think that people of all shapes and sizes will be very comfortable in this sedan. Also, better yet, is that these seats do provide a lot of support and bolstering, and it does keep you in place when you are on a winding back road. And lastly, for passengers in the back, the main difference here between the base and premium is that you do not receive a USB-A or USB-C input back here, whereas in the premium trim and above, you will. If you do have taller passengers and older passengers sitting in the second row and you want to prioritize their comfort and their convenience, you might want to go with the premium. But for passengers in the back in general, in regards to interior dimensions and just overall space, they are going to feel rather comfortable in here because I adjusted the seat in front of me all the way back and it's somewhat on a recline, and I have plenty of legroom here. Also, because you don't have the moonroof, you don't have a panoramic moonroof either, you have plenty of headroom as well. So I think passengers of all shapes and sizes should be able to sit in this car relatively comfortably. Obviously, because you do have an aggressive center hump, you won't be able to fit a third person in the center, but that's not something you would expect in this market. But I will say though, with these cloth seats, they do provide a lot of support and a lot of cushioning. So they're actually rather comfortable to sit in, even though I'm not the driver in this WRX, at least right now. Also, another thing too, with the WRX Base, you will not receive a center armrest with two cup holders. So those are two minor sacrifices by going with the base trim over the premium. Then as you make your way around to the back, as you're going to find in all trims for 2024, behind the second row seat, you're looking at right around 12.5 cubic feet of room. So if you are looking for a vehicle that is somewhat practical in this market, but still gives you the performance and sporty attributes you deserve and demand at around $30,000, you're going to find that with the WRX. Obviously, it's not going to be as practical as a hatchback, but this cargo area is pretty wide and deep. So you'll be able to store probably 6, 7, or 8 bags of luggage back here with no issues. Then, of course, you can lower the second row seats to maximize the cargo space if you have no one sitting in the second row. And lastly, but most importantly, for 2024, the Subaru WRX is powered by a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, producing 271 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. And with the base trim, the 6-speed manual is standard, so if you want the CVT, which I don't know why, you'll have to spend a little extra for the Premium, Limited, or GT. With the 6-speed manual with the STI short throw shifter, upshifting and downshifting is phenomenal in this car, very satisfying. But even though you don't have the 18s with the base, I noticed that the suspension is very firm and very tight, which makes it one of the better cornering cars in this market, under $40,000 and just over $30,000 to start. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, well, how would you compare the Subaru WRX objectively to other cars that you have reviewed so far this year, such as the Volkswagen GLI and Honda Civic Si? I will say that with the Honda Civic Si, I think it's a more refined car. It's not as analog, it's not as old school as the Subaru WRX. But when you compare the WRX to the Volkswagen GLI, when you get the GLI in a manual, that gear shifter and the clutch leaves so much more to be desired. It's like Volkswagen gave up on the manual just to give you the incentives to choose the DSG. And I understand that. With the DSG, it's a phenomenal automatic, and a lot of buyers typically go in that direction with the GTI and GLI. But if you're looking for an old school experience, you want a car that you can rotate the gears yourself, doesn't have a lot of the technology you're going to find in the Civic Si, because you have to rev match. You don't get auto rev matching in this car like you would with Honda. But what you are going to have here, though, is a sedan that feels so old school and so retro in the 2020s that you just can't stop driving it. Now, this isn't the first time I have driven the Base, and also I own a Premium, so I'm used to this car and its quirks. But I'm going to say this, that with this 2.4 liter turbo Boxer 4, it has so much more character than other 4-cylinders in this market. And also, its weight distribution, all-wheel drive system, and just the way the Subaru engineered this particular generation, it is such a pleasure to drive, especially in the corners. When you're on a roadie like this or on the back roads, it's so much fun. And I will say, comparing this to my Volkswagen GTI, it's a better handling car. The rear end doesn't lift when you are in the corners. When you are on a winding back road and driving very spiritedly, it feels very planted. While I'm not the biggest fan of the brakes for this generation, and I do think they leave a bit more to be desired, they get the job done. Now, obviously, I would prefer the Brembos that you can get with the TR and, of course, the TS for 2025. But I really am not complaining at all here with this car, because you get a lot more feedback. You feel more connected to the platform and chassis overall. And you're a part of the driving experience rather than just being a passive occupant or just a cog in the wheel. And while this particular generation you don't get the Boxer rumble, you still get a satisfying sound. Now, on the highway, at highway speeds at around 65 miles an hour, with the 17s, it doesn't have as much road noise. It's a bit quieter in here than my 18s. I also like the fact that I can pass slower drivers safely and merge onto the highway safely as well. Now, with the base trim, you do not get blind spot detection, so a bit more of a retro experience there. And while you do get the EyeSight driver assist technologies for 2024, it doesn't really override your experience, because you do get lane centering, and then as some enthusiasts would say, a bit more of the nanny tech. But honestly, it still feels analog and as old school as it did for the prior 2 model years. Rev matching is very easy in this car too, so if this is going to be your first daily driver with a manual, you're going to find yourself right at home with the WRX. And just speaking from experience, I learned how to drive stick on my WRX, so I think it's actually a very compliant car. And even though it doesn't have the auto rev matching and some other features that a lot of manual cars these days do have, it's very easy to get acclimated with. Also, one thing I love too, and this really adds to the handling and cornering, even though we're driving in a straight line on the highway, is that you have a very beefy steering wheel. I mean, one of the beefiest in this segment, with aggressive 10 and 2 positions, but very, very firm 9 and 3 grips. And that provides so much more confidence when you are on back roads. And as I said before, in the corners, it feels planted. You can really throw this car around. And this, to me, is a true enthusiast experience in this segment. It's also a car that's perfect for those who want a lot more power under $35,000. Whereas with the Civic Si, 201 horsepower is a bit low. And while I learned to appreciate that sedan, I am a bit power hungry, so 271 is more than adequate. And then comparing this to the GLI is actually, especially if you go with the Autobahn trim, somewhat of a luxurious experience. Even with the manual, it feels like a trimmed down Audi, especially with the full digital gauge cluster, the infotainment system. Now I can't wait to experience the 2025 GLI because I think they did make some slight tweaks that might elevate that car a bit in this market, although they didn't change the powertrain at all, so that's a bit sad. And finally, what keeps me coming back for more with this platform is that Subaru kept things simple. They didn't complicate the interior, they didn't complicate the technology that you'll be interacting with. Sure, some people don't like the 11.6-inch touchscreen, but I've gotten used to it. I'm very acclimated with it. I also think that in regards to what you have here, in terms of the layout, the safety technology, it doesn't feel as modern as other cars in this segment, which I absolutely love. The fact that it feels analog and tactile is what makes this generation rather special, even though they did soften it quite a bit from the last generation. This isn't going to be a car that it will abuse you on a longer road trip or just on a longer commute. But with the base trim though, I do think it's offering all the essentials. You get dual zone climate control, you have a USB-A, USB-C input. Sure, you're missing out on some other creature comforts that you're gonna find in the premium trim and above. But if you don't need heated front seats, you don't need an auto dimming rearview mirror or heated side mirrors, the base is gonna give you quite a bit here. I also love the cloth upholstery in the base. Even though it is a bit different than what you're going to find in the premium, it still gives you all the support necessary when you are on those winding back roads. But all in all, with the WRX for 2024 and the base trim, I still think it's a great option. I think it's a great choice, just over $30,000. And when you are comparing it to other rivals, especially the Honda Civic Si, the Volkswagen GLI, maybe even the Elantra N, I still think the WRX is the cooler option, just the way it drives. I think it's also more enjoyable as an enthusiast. And one last thing that I have not talked about at all throughout this test drive is that you do get all-wheel drive. And you're not going to find that in any rival under $40,000 unless you find a Toyota dealership that doesn't have any markups on their GR Corollas. Because even with the Volkswagen Golf R, you could be spending over 50 grand. So even when you are maxing out for the Limited or TR, spending $42,000 doesn't seem that crazy when you're comparing it to the rivals that can go for $50,000, if not more. And for those reasons, I think this is still a solid choice in 2024. And depending on the type of person you are, what you're looking for in your next daily driver, it truly is all you need in life. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick review. If it did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys next time.